just excited to be a part of this panel and learn from my colleagues here, but just adding the angle of the city's responsibility and opportunities that we have now.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. All right, the next panelist I'd like to introduce is Janelle Brown. She is with a company called Adaptive X, which is a professional development and software company committed to improving education quality for students through culturally responsive teaching and learning. Janelle is a native of Seattle, Washington, a resident of the DC metro area for the last 10 years. She has worked the past decade in the DC public charter and non-traditional education sector as a special education middle, and she has also served as founding and instruction for Sustainable Futures Public Charter School and Director of Academics and Training for Community College Preparatory Academy. Janelle is currently utilizing this diverse depth of knowledge and broad skill set in the consulting sector through her firm On to Something, which specializes in executive functioning, training, and development. In addition, OTS works with organizations to access gaps and build solutions to fill them sustainably and equitably from a theory meets practice approach. Janelle holds a Master's of Education degree with Multicultural Curriculum and Instruction concentration from Trinity University and a Bachelor's in American Ethnic Studies from the University of Washington. She also holds professional certifications from the University of South Florida in diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace, and restorative practices, training, and facilitation from the International Institute for Restorative Practices, as well as executive function coaching from the EDGE Foundation. As an active member of the Zeta Phi Beta sorority, built around the principles of service, scholarship, and sisterly love, she embodies that in her passion for service and community. Janelle is a lifelong learner, full of curiosity and enthusiasm for new lessons. With that, I'll hand it over to Janelle.
Good morning / afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're sitting physically. Thank you, Bill. It's always weird when you hear your stuff where you're like, who is that? That sounds so cool. Wow. And you're like, oh, me. Yikes. Okay, let me turn on my mute. So I'm here wearing my Adaptive X wig. As you've heard, I wear many. I say wigs instead of hats, you know, inclusion, right? So that being said, speaking on behalf of Adaptive X today, part of the theory meets practice approach is something that we love because of Zaretta Hammond. I don't know if you can see the book because of my background, but culturally responsive teaching and the brain is an actionable way to do equity, do inclusion in your classroom every day. I am a strong proponent of DEI is not something you do when, okay, I see you, Bob with the book. Yeah, Bob with the book. It's not something you do when, right? So we hear a lot of schools like, oh, when enrollment, when we hire, when things slow down, right? We'll do DEI work, we'll look into it. And it's like, I hear you, and if you don't do it now, it'll never happen, right? It's not something you do. Equity, inclusion, diversity, they're woven into the fabric of all of the work. And so using the CRT promising practices that Adaptive X uses, we are in schools 50 across the country, some in states that are very much don't say the word diversity, Arizona. So that being said, we're doing this work and doing it in ways that are specific to the community that we serve, using these promising practices. Sometimes DEI is really touchy-feely. People feel like, oh, it's, you know, subjective, and it's like, and it can be, and it is, right? That's the whole nature of it. Everyone's DEI work is going to look different based on the population that they serve. A predominantly Black community doesn't not need DEI, right? Like, excuse the double negative, but you get what I mean, right? Just because, oh, it's all a certain diaspora, it's all a certain group of folks. No, we all interact with DEI differently because of the nature of society that we're in. With all of the intersections, with all of the different elements of what diversity is, finding ways to not only celebrate that, include it, but also understand it are paramount. And so one of my favorite processes with Adaptive X is the promising practices in practice analysis. We look at, it's a sort of landscape. It doesn't do everything, but it focuses on how are these promising practices showing up day to day within your school community. And that level of analysis, to the degree that it is a needs analysis, provides that organization, whether school, non-public, public, for-profit organizations, it looks specifically at that organization's culture to help them grow in the spaces and places where DEI needs it from an evidence-based and actually measurable place, because we know what measured gets done. So thank you all so much. I'm excited to answer any questions and collaborate with you all today.
All right, thanks, Janelle. Next, we have Louvel Brown, and he is an experienced educator who has held positions as a teacher, assistant principal, school CIO, and superintendent of schools. Currently, Dr. Brown is serving as the superintendent of the Ithaca City School District in Ithaca, New York. The Ithaca District has experienced unprecedented levels of success. Dr. Brown has received various awards and recognitions. He was named the 2017 New York State Superintendent of the Year and has been listed by Trust Ed as one of the nation's top educators and thought leaders. In 2022, he received the prestigious Dr. Effie H. Jones Humanitarian Award, and Dr. Brown has been recognized by the National School Boards Association as a 20 to watch and difference maker. He received the Center for Digital Education Top 30 Award and received the 2014 eSchool News Tech Savvy Superintendent Award. He was selected by the U.S. Department of Education as one of the nation's top 100 innovative superintendents. Along with that distinction, Dr. Brown was invited to be a featured speaker at President Barack Obama's first National Superintendent Summit at the White House. Additionally, Dr. Brown has served on the New York State Council for School Superintendents Executive Committee, the School Superintendents Association Digital Consortium, the Center for Digital Education Advisory Council, and the Consortium for School Networks Empowered Superintendent Advisory Panel. A lot of accolades there, and with that, I'll turn it over to Louvel to do his introduction.
Hey, Bill, thank you. And that was embarrassing. And thank you all for being here. It's an honor to be here with you and to have this opportunity to learn and to share. Hopefully you'll quickly forget all that Bill just shared about me, but hear this when I say I am the son of Bobby and Lucille, and I am from a small town in central Virginia, Fluvanna County. If you've ever heard of Fluvanna County, then you're probably one of my cousins. But I share that because I'm one of a few people who look like me, particularly Black boys who have survived that dirt road in which I've grown up on. And as I've been now committed to being a lifelong educator, much of what led to the most brilliant people I've ever known not being here anymore is this conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion in schools, and us not receiving the kind of love that we received on that dirt road in our homes, that same kind of love when we went to school. So I've been on this lifelong journey to cultivate a loving approach to teaching and learning in spaces to validate and affirm and to build and bridge for the young people we serve. And I got to tell you now, I've been in, and Corey knows this well, I've been in every single state in about 15 different countries over the last 3 or 4 years talking about this conversation. And I share that humbly because a lot of places won't let me come back. They won't let me come back because we say words like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I can say to y'all with much confidence now, and a lot of, I've lost a lot of hair, that there are a lot of folks who want us to stay in this bit of a time loop, because we've been having the same conversations. When we talk about cultivating access and opportunities for everybody, the resistance has been fierce. And if you take the words like busing and integration out of the conversation and you plug in diversity, equity, and inclusion, we've been having the same conversation for generations. Heck, if you take away the word communism and you plug in critical race theory, we've figured out a way to just put a blank label on everything to say, stop doing it. No, so this conversation that we've been having now, unfortunately, has been one that's been predictable. And my job now, what I do with my school district and many other places is I say to folks, if we want to break this time loop, if we want to change what's happening for all of our young people, see, I am here because by accident. My twin brother and I survived by chance because my mama played bingo with a second grade teacher on Tuesday nights who helped her navigate the system. But if we want to do this at scale, when we cultivate the gifts and talents for everybody, then we got to move beyond the academic conversations about DEI. Let's like things on Facebook, let's share articles, let's spend an entire academic school year at the board meetings talking about the names of holidays. Or how about this one? Hey, I'm from Charlottesville, just outside of Charlottesville, Virginia now, and I spent a lot of time in Richmond, Virginia. I'm done with those daggone conversations about statues. All right. So I'm asking us to move to what I call the authentic conversation. You know, the academic one can get uncomfortable. The academic one can win you Superintendent of the Year awards. The authentic journey will get you fired and get the resistance coming. Let me tell you right now, because what I'm doing right now for my young people is I'm cultivating laboratories for social change. See, if we want to improve the social emotional health for our young people, let's give them more power and control of their environments. And let's embed that in the curriculum and what we develop, whether it's solving problems that are relevant to the local communities, which will be ableism, classism, sexism, and racism. So that's a part of the curriculum. I can show people where it's in the academic standards, but you know, everywhere I go, there are people who are writing laws that say we can't talk about that. That's what gets me to the other piece on the authentic journey, changing our pedagogies. You know, the ways in which we have been instructed to facilitate a learning conversation in classrooms, we know by design is not going to be responsive to many of the young people in our schools. Well, at this point, the majority of them. Everything, so if I had more time, I would get into everything we know about pedagogy. We're doing it, we know that we're doing the wrong thing for kids of color, all right, as far as how we facilitate that learning experience. So what I say, we're going to be culturally responsive in our pedagogies, but you know, that gets pushed back. And then finally, if we truly want to be on an authentic journey and to cultivate access and opportunities for everybody, we need to change policies. Because every single day we are perpetuating policies that we know are negatively impacting the young people in our schools. Code of conduct, field trips, special education, meal purchasing. I can keep going. I got them all in my head right here. Every single policy that we know perpetuates inequities, we do very little, if nothing, to disrupt. Heck, there are places who are writing laws to produce inequities. And that leads me to love. And, you know, Corey, as I define love, and we really talk about what it's like to be forgiving, truthful, honest, caring, our schools, that's not the default. Our schools are I say love is the antidote to what I would refer to as white supremacy culture, which is what our schools have been built on. So anyway, I probably said too much, and I hope nobody turns their cameras off and run out of the room already. But that's part of the work and the journey that I'm on, and I am honored to be on that journey with y'all today.
All right, thanks, Will. I love that. All right, next is Donna Maria Cameron. Over 3 decades, Donna Maria Cameron has been creating opportunities for young people to overcome institutional barriers and transform their lives. She earned her BA in Economics and History from American University and her Master's in Education from Harvard Graduate School of Education. A lifelong high school educator, she taught a variety of history and English classes before entering administration. Driven by her core belief that it is the responsibility of schools to teach all children, in 2010, she founded the Attleboro Community Academy, an alternative high school for at-risk youth in Attleboro, Massachusetts. Continuing her work as a student advocate and community builder, Cameron currently works at Boston College Lynch School of Education and Human Development as a program supervisor for students completing their field placement teaching. In collaboration with Cheryl Harris and Associates, she designs and runs diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops for educators and nonprofit organizations. In her spare time, Cameron volunteers at Abbey's House in Worcester. She is a vice president of the Unitarian Universalist Society of Grafton and Upton, and a board member of Boston Urban Academy. Thank you very much for joining us, Donna, and take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here today. I'm already so excited about the different things that we've heard. I want to start by thanking Bill and Rotary for hosting this important event. To say thank you to my fellow panelists in joining me to discuss equity in schools and what we can do about creating a more just, equitable school environment where all schools can thrive. And then to all of you here on this beautiful day, because you understand that the work of a just society begins in schools. I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself. So my name is Donna Maria Cameron, and I am an educator in my soul. I've devoted my life to creating classrooms and schools where students can take agency of their lives. As Paul said, I started as a high school teacher in Attleboro, Massachusetts. And if you're not familiar with Attleboro, it is a small city on the border between Massachusetts and Rhode Island. A colleague of mine once described it as a small city with all the problems of a large city on a smaller scale. I taught for 15 years, and while I was there, I started to notice right away that a certain group of students were always overlooked, they were neglected, they were unable to be successful, and I started asking why. Why is this happening? And I started to come against the systemic problems in schools and why, and that certain students were unable to be successful, not because of anything that they did, but because of the structure of schools itself. Well, that led me on a 5-year journey to convince the Attleboro Public Schools to create an alternative high school for what we euphemistically refer to as at-risk students. Well, first of all, these students weren't at risk, they already past risked, because these were students who dropped out of school at 16, 17, 18. By the time they entered 9th grade, they're 17-year-old 9th graders, and we already know what's going to happen to them. We're students who are formerly incarcerated, teen parents who come to school with a plethora of problems and experiences of which the schools are not able to be flexible with and embrace. And so I convinced the school district to create a public alternative high school that ran from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m., where students could be challenged and hold high academic standards in an environment that is caring, compassionate, and takes the whole child into account. What we discovered is that kids just flocked to us, and we didn't have to go out and do any recruiting because there were so many students who were struggling for all kinds of reasons. But I learned something really important as the principal of this school, and that is that I got to stand side by side with these students. I got to stand in their shoes, and I experienced their sense of alienation, their sense of otherness, their sense of feeling overshadowed their entire lives. And it was through that experience that I decided that I wanted to refine my focus and to actively address some of the systemic problems that these students were experiencing, and to take this sort of boots on the ground experience and bring that lens to this work. So, how do you do this work? That's really the question, right? I think that what we're trying to do right now is what kind of actions can we do, right? So I personally am doing 2 things. One is at Boston College, I'm working with our teacher educators to help them take the theory of DEI and bring it into the classroom, and what does it really look like? And then I work as a senior consultant with Cheryl Harris and Associates, and she's been doing this work for 30 years, DEI work across public and private sectors. I've specifically chosen to work within schools because that's my place. That's what I know and I understand in the core of my own being. The first thing I had to do in order to do this work was I had to confront my own racism. I pause when I say that because it still shakes me up to have to say that out loud, that in fact, yes. As a white woman growing up in this country, I have internalized a level of systemic racism. And before I can do this work, I have to take that hard look at myself all the time. And I have to be able to be transparent and willing to lean into my discomfort, to know that I'm going to make mistakes, to know that I'm going to potentially offend somebody because I'm making them uncomfortable, or offend somebody because I have misstepped. I have committed a microaggression. I might have committed a macroaggression and didn't mean to. And then I have to make amends for that. And so part of the work that we all can do, that I believe so strongly in my heart, is that we can model what it looks like to approach our life with a racial equity lens. Everywhere I go, everything I do, I'm always looking and saying, who's not here? What's missing? What am I not seeing? That has become as much a part of me as when I first studied to be a teacher. I learned to ask, where is the teachable moment? What would a kid think or see or do when they saw this? And as that's the fiber of my being, this is the new layer, new fibers that I'm trying to integrate into myself. So I personally think that there are 4 steps that we can take. And I just want to sort of throw them out there to you. And then I hope that we can dig into some of these things. So as a school district, school districts must commit to leadership professional development. We see lots of school districts where they'll have a PD day where all the teachers and everybody can do DEI work. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about training our administrators, training our leaders. Administrators have to lead this work. They have to create an environment where they can make mistakes, where they can be transparent. They need to model this work of looking at education through a racial equity lens. We need to encourage our school districts to conduct equity audits. What are your policies and practices? What do you have an easily accessible bias policy? Who wrote it? Who are the stakeholders there? What does the data tell you? Take a look at your suspension data, your attendance data. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts requires that we report this information. Well, what do we do with it? What does it tell us? What are our hiring policies and practices? Cheryl Harris and I have gone into school districts and we've taken a look at student handbooks and we've taken a look at human resource policies. How do you get through the hiring channels? You know, we talk about networking. Well, guess what? Networking can sometimes be code for finding other people who look just like us to get jobs. So in Eastern Massachusetts, when we're looking at who's in our schools, maybe networking is the traditional networking way is not the way that we want to try to recruit and retain people of color, teachers of color. Then we need to be able to have our difficult conversations. Lavelle, thank you so much for saying that word, critical race theory. We need to take the fear out of what that is. We need to take it off of being an explosive topic. We need to teach our teachers, our administrators, our parent leaders, how to talk about critical race theory so that when we understand that all it is teaching our children how to be critical thinkers, to adjust, to look at history and literature with an inquiry-based model, how to be problem solvers, and how to speak our truth. And then we need to teach our teachers and our leaders to tell our stories. Cheryl Harris and I often, when we start working with a group, we ask them, what is your first experience with race? Well, I had to answer that question, and I was really frightened when I had to first answer it, because my answer was, I was almost in high school. I was almost in college before I really had an experience with race. I grew up in a white, middle-class, educated community in Long Island, New York. And I had to learn that that was my experience. And that experience really colored the way I saw things. And then I had to begin to tell my story, like I told you, how now I can say that I am a woman who has internalized racist beliefs and attitudes, and that I have to work hard to address them. So, and then finally, involve the community. Bring the community in, have conversations about what do you want for your children, and how this needs to be a conversation where everybody has a place at the table. So anyway, as you can see, I was worried I was only going to have 2 minutes worth of things to say. Clearly, I can go on and on and on. So I'm hoping that you're going to join me in the remaining time that we have to really dig deep into some of these. So thank you very much. I'll turn it back to you, Bill.
Okay, great. So our last panelist is Corey Murray, the co-founder of Rocket PD. As someone with cerebral palsy, Corey has faced many challenges as a child, physical and social emotional. If not for two incredible forces in his life, a supportive family and a committed team of public educators, he would not be where he is today. Corey has a journalism degree from the University of Maryland, is an education journalist and a K-12 marketing. On Rocket PD, Corey has dedicated his career to turn agency empowerment to America's K-12 class, to ensure that all students, regardless of their obstacles that they face, have an opportunity to reach and see. And with that, I'll turn it over to Corey.
Hey, everybody. Good afternoon and good morning. I'm hoping you can hear me all right. And Bill, thank you for that introduction. You may have been able to hear some of that. I think his audio cut out a little bit, but I did just want to share with you quickly sort of my personal journey and how I got here, because I think it's relevant. And then I won't talk too long because I want to leave some time for some conversation and discussion about some of these very important issues. But as Bill said, my name is Corey. I am a proud product of the public school system out of Howard County, Maryland. I also am someone with cerebral palsy, and that experience led me to have a lot of challenges growing up, both physical and social emotional, as Bill said. And I'll tell you, it was, if not for my family, if not for the teachers who I encountered, I'm not sure exactly what position I'd be in. But I will tell you that the benefit that I had was that I did have a very supportive family, and I did have a very supportive group of educators around me who sort of helped me turn my differences into strengths in a lot of ways, if you will, and empowered me to think differently about my own situation and how to overcome a lot of those obstacles. I will tell you, when I was born, the doctors told my parents that I would not learn how to walk. They emphatically told them that. I learned to walk when I was 4 years old. When I went to school, it was assumed that I would not be able to do certain things or learn certain things. And I was put in certain classes and had to kind of prove to my teachers, to my fellow students and others, that I could read, that I could do certain things, that I could achieve. And I was able to do that not by way of miracle. I was able to do that because I had a supportive cast around me. I had folks who really wanted me to succeed and showed me that path and showed me what was possible. I don't feel like, when I look around the K-12 education landscape in particular, that that's always the case or nearly the case for a lot of students. I founded Rocket PD because I wanted students to have access to that agency and empowerment that I had, and I wanted to find ways to help them get it. So that's what I'm doing here in my life's work at this point. And I'm hoping we can have a conversation about what that looks like in schools. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Corey. So at this point, I'd like to open the conversation to questions and answers or thoughts. If anybody has anything they'd like to speak, I think you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make a comment. All right, I'll start. One of the things we've encountered in my town is that there are students in need, and we don't necessarily see them. To identify the kids that are in need, arms around them and show them that we love them and care for them and want them to succeed, and give them the supports that they need to be successful.
Hey, Bill, I'll just note that you've been breaking up a lot with your audio. One trick with Zoom is if you turn off your camera, it takes less bandwidth and maybe your audio will get through. So we missed about a quarter of what you just said.
I was just saying that how do you find the students that are in need in your community? Like, we found that when we went and sat with the principals of a couple of the schools, they told us about stories, and we had no idea that there were these kids that there's a lot that we could offer them. And like, what's your experience with sort of finding those kids and bringing them, bringing the services that need them?
I think I can go first if I understand the question correctly. Because part of my definition and our definition for equity is reducing the predictability of who succeeds and who fails. I don't think the question you pose is one that is almost rhetorical. We know which kids are not doing well in our schools, and typically they're the kids who are growing up in poverty or those of color. And the data has been the same for generations. Frankly, one could argue that it's gotten worse, particularly for Black boys. So when you say, how do we find, if I'm understanding correctly, how do we find or how do we connect with the kids who are in most need? I mean, we know who they are. Now, what we do about it and what we do to purposely interrupt or disrupt it is the second and the hardest part, because typically in our school communities, we've chosen to be neutral. And neutrality is the ableist, racist, classist, and sexist approach to this work. So anyway, I think I'm hoping my colleagues disagree with me here, but I think we don't need to search too hard. We know where they are. We just choose not to talk to them.
Maybe that's part of it. Like, how do you set up the systems so that those kids are identified and receive the right services?
I can speak to that, and I just will, +1, Brother Brown, in that the systems are the problem, right? So if you're looking to set up a system and you're setting that system up either within an already established structurally racist, classist, et cetera, on your isms system, you can only innovate so much. So as an organization or as someone funding relief, you have to be committed to breaking those structural systems. It was interesting to hear Donna share her story of founding a school for what we consider at-promise youth, because I did the same thing here in DC, but it would be interesting to hear the experiences Donna and I both had in doing that with the authorizer, with funders. It was very difficult as two Black women educators, not connected to Harvard, not connected to all of the prestige, to found and operate a public charter school in the District of Columbia. Whereas that's not the same challenge for other folks. So it's twofold. When you say, how do we find the neediest? You have to define what you mean when you say need. And how do we serve them? You have to be committed to serving outside of the systems that have underserved them to begin with.
And I want to add that there are agencies and places within every town or collaboration of towns that have data right at your fingertips. So for example, we know that absenteeism in elementary school is a huge predictor of success in middle and high school. We know that kids who are held back in elementary school are far greater to drop out. And the absentee data is right there. And to dig down, really, if you want to know about like, well, why are these particular children not coming to school? What can your local Rotary do? Well, what exactly is going on there? Do you need to provide better before school care and after school care? After school care is expensive. Are you helping to fund those kinds of programs? I volunteer at a women's shelter where families are. Every school, McKinney-Vento is a federal law that is there. And who are your McKinney-Vento families? And what kind of trauma are they bringing into the school? And how can you let the shelter, I mean, the law says you might have a child in Needham who becomes homeless, and that child is living in a shelter in Quincy, which is what, about a half hour away. So, but the law says that they're being transported back and forth between Quincy and Needham. So who is that child? What can you do for that child, right? If you want to get down to the child level. And then, I mean, I do think that Rotary does wonderful things by making statements to start to dismantle some of the structures and going to school committee meetings and pushing to find out, like, so who's not graduating from high school? And if it's only 2% of kids who's not graduating, 2% of kids is still maybe 20 children, 20 kids who don't graduate from high school. What happens to them? Those are the kinds of things that you can do. Just go out there person by person.
This is Corey. I just wanted to piggyback on that for a second. I feel like it's very important when you talk about partnership for Rotaries in particular and groups like Rotaries to partner with their schools, ask the right questions, right? But then the partnership doesn't end with the schools. I think it's very important also to partner with the families and to include the families. The families are really the bridge to the student, and they're the ones that I think oftentimes there's an assumption that families either don't know how or don't want to provide support, which is largely incorrect and untrue. Most families really do want to provide that support and that help. They often just don't know how to do it or have resources at their disposal to help them. And so partnering with the families is critically important. And I would say in my own experience, I found that people were simply just afraid to ask questions. They didn't want to broach the topic of my disability. And so they just didn't ask because they were afraid of what the answers would be or what reactions they would have to that as a result. And so don't be afraid to ask questions. I think when we can engage in dialogue that is honest and open, we can be very effective and help each other in a lot of ways. So please remember that as you're thinking through some of these things.
That's definitely helpful information.
Hi, this is Liz Cobbs. May I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm not feeling well today, so I'm not going to go on video, but I'm very interested in all the different approaches, and particularly when many of you on the panel talked about structure and then content. And I moved 2 years ago to Massachusetts and into a town called Concord, Massachusetts. It's 93% white. We have the METCO program, which is a busing program to bring children out of Boston schools to 33 townships across Greater Boston. And the structure of METCO makes me cry. These students are working so hard to get to the school. Even in kindergarten, they travel an hour to an hour and a half each way. And one of the things we're trying to do is find time for these children to get more support. so that they can get, one of the families said, why aren't our children getting all the way to the AP courses at the high school? They're not getting there. And they have come to Concord since kindergarten. So there's a need. We'd love to look at this equity piece, but how do you advise, one, to work with the school system? So that's a structural issue. And two, this challenge with the time to get, I every time I speak to people in town, highly educated town, they want to help volunteer, to support children, to get that stand, to look over that fence. But the structure of the program doesn't allow, and to the, Mr. Murray, your last comment about families, it's very hard for those families in Boston to feel connected in a small white town like this. So I'm not posing a very clear question, but it's a multitude of issues where the structure hinders potentially some more goodwill than is being shown today. Thank you.
Anybody want to take that one?
I'll just, this is Janelle, just suggest that anyone who's looking to make a change has to negotiate their readiness to be real, right? So you have to decide, how ready are we to make the drastic changes, right? And sometimes there, even an example that's ringing in my head is earlier during the keynote, someone put in the chat that they were, I don't like the fence picture because it implies that you're taking something away. And it's like, interesting perspective, right? Like, I've seen this, I've used this joint 1,100 times over. Never once have I heard someone think of it that way, but never once can I remember having done it with this diverse of a group of people. And I'm not going to make any assumptions or judgments on the person that said it. I saw their picture, I saw their name, that's all I know. But that reads to me as a very privileged perspective, because what you're doing is you're unable to associate the image you saw from the second image. In the first image, you see the multitude of boxes and you see people standing. So you think that this next image is the same thing and that somehow boxes have been taken away. And that within itself is, and that person's here in this group, right? Like, they're here at the DEI thing. They're trying to be woke and trying to be, are you though? Because inherently your mind went to capitalism, lack. Like, right, you went to a deficit. Well, for everyone to have something, someone has to lose. That's not what anyone's saying at all. Because in that image, we saw that everyone had what they needed. Your issue is that someone still didn't have too much or didn't have more, right? So like, we have to think about, are we really ready to be real? If equity means taking something away and I still have all I need, is that really a problem? Why does other people having something mean that it's less for me? And if it does, why is that a bad thing? But until we have those kind of conversations, changing structures, changing systems is just not going to happen. Folks are going to innovate to the best they can within those structures and systems, but then you're going to get to the same, well, the time, the structure, those are things that are malleable. Any structure can be changed, time can be extended, remediated, right? But it's like those barriers are put in place because of thinking. So challenging your own thinking, beliefs, intents is really that first step for any type of change, personal, systemic, etc.
Yeah, on the timepiece, we're hearing a lot right now about just academic loss as related to COVID, and everyone is talking about how in the heck are we going to catch kids up to where they need to be. I think I saw an article, I just put a newsletter out yesterday on the fact that the price tag on that's going to run up to $700 billion. We got $122 billion out of the federal government for that to help K-12 schools. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the estimate of what is needed. And I think that we can get ourselves into trouble when we say things like we don't have enough money, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough people. We need to figure out ways to make things work before school, after school, as was said, what can we do not within the system, but outside of the system to create more opportunities, even if it takes more resources, more partnership, more things that make us uncomfortable or put us outside of our comfort zone. That's how we need to think about these problems. And it's really the only way to solve them.
Liz, I have a question for you. You said that it's hard for the families of the METCO students to feel connected to Concord. So I challenge you to reframe that and ask, why should the METCO families have to feel connected to Concord? What about the Concord families feeling connected to the students coming from South Boston or Roxbury, and the parents, the families in Concord? Has the school district ever sponsored something where the families, parents, and children in Concord are going the other way, back into Boston, and just standing in somebody else's town makes a difference?
So we do a lot of that, but it kind of peters out by high school. So we have several activities with the K through 8 that are just as you described, and they are improving, right? They expand so that families have buddy system and so on. But when I'm talking about structural issues, I'm also talking about, there are 33 METCO communities. There are 3, now 4, because we put 2 METCO family representatives on our school committee. There are only 4 of 33 that have representation on what's happening in the schools. And those folks in any of the towns that have people from the Boston family side of this coalition, they don't have voting rights. And I feel they should, so, I mean, there's, and then I went to well, anyway, I don't want to take up all the time, but there are structural issues that are beyond what we're talking about here that make it harder to do what you're describing, particularly as you get to the high school level. But as you said, Ms. Cameron, there's a lot of engagement with families when the children are young. It's just then the children, their friendships change, and but what we do is we work hard to ensure that there's always a backup family in town, so that if there's a snowstorm or if there's a huge test and they want to feel they could stay overnight in town, they do. They have a place to go to do that, and those relationships have really been strong, I guess, over time. But it's not enough. I do say, Janelle Brown, your points, I think, were very valid. And part of the struggle there is that you can have individual intention, but there's a big town, and so how do you do that? And through the League of Women Voters, we've actually put on an education program, DEI panel, looked at history, we looked at education. The next one is on housing and land use and why it's so restrictive here. So there's a lot of education in the town. I think we also have to do beyond the schools to bring what you're talking about, a more determined advocacy that is town-wide. I'm only one person, and I'm completely flawed. I know that. So anyway, there we go.
Hello. I'm late joining this breakout session. Just wanted to introduce myself, and then I had a question. I'm having some challenges here in where I live. So I'm a doctor by trade, but started a nonprofit organization in 2020 after George Floyd, and also my kids have dealt with like racial issues in the schools. So my organization is named Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And so basically, instead of trying to be the problem or, backlash after any racial discrimination issues, we decided to be a solution to the issue. So what we do as an organization is provide education and awareness in regards to marginalized individuals in our community. So I live in the suburbs of Philadelphia, and my school district is predominantly Caucasian, white. And so, there's a lot of ignorance here, basically. And so instead of backlashing and saying, everyone's a racist or whatever, that's not necessarily true, but definitely bringing awareness and education to the masses here. And so our challenge here is that we're unable to get into the schools and help out the elementary and secondary and high school because our superintendent here does not feel there's an issue. And so I've heard this several times. I do have a sister that lives in Boston, Massachusetts, and Liz, I totally am aware of what's going on there. She used to be a DEI director and left because of similar things that I'm reporting. There's no support by the superintendent. I think, a lot of school districts now are just checking the box, and stating that they need a DEI director, but don't really believe in it. And so our concern here is how do we help bring the education when we're being blocked by administration. What we have done to kind of help in education is we put together a diverse preschool kit and deliver it to like 15 preschools in our area, because once you start little, I'm thinking the education will be better and, things can improve from there, but just looking to get some feedback on what else we can do to help in the school district when we're being blocked. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for being here. I have some thoughts. And it's somewhat of a both and. I appreciate your approach to connecting with the youngest learners. That's always important. But I would also say, if you can't get through the administration, change the administration. And I am currently sitting in a seat because of a community organizing around changing what was happening in schools, but more importantly, changing the power structure and the influence. And that similar nonprofit group came together and is still together. I meet with them monthly. And they put up board candidates. They had a slate to run each year during board election. And we're seeing the same things happen to stop equity, inclusion, and diversity. And those folks have been just organizing for generations to do that, and they're successful. But to truly change, and to provide the kind of access to the community, and for the community to have the access to the kids and to hear all those voices, we need to change who's at the table. Now, let me be clear now, I'm one of the few people of color in the superintendent seat in New York State, the most diverse state in the country, and there's only a handful of us in this leadership role. And trust me, they come for us each and every day. They literally make up stuff so we don't stay here. And every other state has a similar issue. The power structure, and we see also in the boards, it's rare that you see a person of color sitting in a board seat in New York State. I'm still here as a superintendent because the majority of my board are folks who've been able to stay on because of community members like you. There are people of color who embrace this work. So anyway, a long story short, change who's in administration. And that's going to take some different types of organizing and conversation and advocacy, but that's ultimately what needs to happen.
And so hence you said you're at the table. I ran for township supervisor as well, and I'm the first Black on our board of supervisors in my township. So I'm like, I need to be at the table to help in making the policies and making change. So this was not on my bucket list and totally uncomfortable because I take care of patients, human beings, and that's what I know. But this is something that I thought was important for me to be at the table and to help marginalized individuals. So that's what I'm doing, and also trying to get other people to do the same so that we can make the changes that everyone has a sense of belonging here in our town. Thank you.
If I could make a suggestion, I'll take myself off video. If I could make a suggestion, in our community, several people got together and created a lived experiences project where they made it possible for people that had experienced some kind of racism or discrimination to go online and tell their story. And the way that information was collected, there was data associated with it. And the people that created the project were data people, and they were able to, anonymize the information, so you're not telling people's names, but build a case for, yes, there is a problem here. And even if there's 2% minorities in a community, there can still be a problem. And it's something that we need to address. So the lived experiences data was a real starting point for getting the select board of our community to do a DEI study. And that's maybe something that you could try. And if you want help with how to make that happen, I'd be happy to hook you up with the people in our community that did that. And it's actually something that's been done in a number of communities in our area.
Bill, weren't some of the actual testimonies on camera also part of that as well?
Yeah, so coming out of that, or in parallel to that, we when George Floyd was murdered, we had a town meeting shortly afterwards, and there were several points in the town meeting where DEI came up, and there was one point in particular where the town wanted to add a police position, and everybody stopped the conversation. There was all this conversation about diversity, and the way that the select board got us to move through it was by agreeing to have a listening session where people from the community could join the Zoom and tell their story, basically. And coming out of that, it was clear that there was a problem, and they created a group called Needham Unites Against Racism. I forget what the acronym is, but and that group went on a whole, they're the ones that did the study, but the lived experience people are operating in parallel and informing that group some with the work that they're doing.
And Dr. Darby, I would also, Adaptive X is in schools all across Massachusetts right now. And that don't necessarily mean anything happening. So I say all that to say, just because don't make getting into the schools your focus as a nonprofit. Like, you have the capacity to do things, to innovate. Like, you're not locked into that system in the same way. And Brother Brown made a good point around getting different folks in administration. And even doing that, there's still a really, really, really intentional way to go about it, because, unfortunately, skin folk ain't kinfolk. Right. So just because someone looks like, every diversity and perspective can be a lot more plentiful than, oh, well, we have a representative of. So be conscientious of that as well, but don't limit yourself or feel like you have to get in schools to be of service. Programs like Rotary, anything that's youth facing is an avenue for you. And you may not have as much of the red tape and the formalities to do the work and impact the people.
Yeah, we decided to do that because we thought like that would trickle out, like, to the community, so we can't fix everyone, and we can't fix the world. But if we started small within the schools, and then that trickles out, right, to the community. So that was our thought. Yes, we are, beside just our community, we do branch out We do work with LGBTQ, special ed, we're doing the whole gamut of marginalized individuals. We have an issue with Native American imagery. So we're trying to fix that as well in the school districts and stuff. So there's so much to be done to make sure that everyone feels welcome and belong here in the United States of America. So we got to start small to kind of ripple out. So where we can help, that's our goal here. And thank y'all for all the suggestions. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? All right, one of the themes or summits initiative, seeing people doing in your communities that were really successful. And what sort of actionable initiatives have you seen in your communities that were really successful and could be copied by other people in their communities?
Okay, I'm going to start that. One of the things that I thought of, two things that I wanted to tell you about. A group of teachers and community members in Attleboro partnered up with the library and created a program called Neighbors in Dialogue in Attleboro, Massachusetts. It's worthy of even going to the Attleboro Library website and learning about it. For a while, they were having open forums once a month, and that just really became a lot of work. And so now it's about, I think it's once every 3 months, and they take on a specific topic and anybody can come. Sometimes we'll have 100 people and sometimes we'll only have 20 people. It's really important to remember that 20 people is still 20 people, and that you don't have to have a huge group of people. And we talked about all kinds of things. Talked about, really one of the things we talked about was hiring in the Attleboro schools, what was happening there. That was one topic. Another topic was police and police interaction with minority communities in Attleboro. You'd be amazed how many people started coming, or at least going to the resources that were there to learn about some things. The other thing that school districts can do and individuals can do is find out about grant opportunities. So I just looked at some of the grants that we had previously tapped into, and Nellie Mae, the Nellie Mae Foundation has a diversity initiative, and they focus on school community partnerships. And there's money out there to get a small group going, to have these kinds of conversations, set actionable goals. And then actually what Nellie Mae does for you is they give you expertise. They pay for consultants to come in and help you do this work. Organizations like the Great School Partnership, they are an organization out of Portland, Maine, and they're devoted to breaking down institutional systemic school barriers to racism and promoting equity in schools. They have their big conference for the New England region in March, And they usually have like over 200 presenters. It's a 3-day workshop, and you can register for 1 day or for 3 day. And it's a great opportunity to see what other school districts are doing. I have a whole list of initiatives that are going on that I would be happy to share with anybody, ways to just learn about what other people are doing. So I recommend that.
So something like the Great Schools Partnership event, our community could sponsor teachers to attend that. Would that be an appropriate thing to do?
That would be an amazing thing to do, actually, because it is expensive. It's in Newport this year on March 27th to the 29th, I think. And it has, and you can sponsor youth as well. So high school kids can go. There are youth-led workshops. I've been a presenter there before, and I've gone as a participant. So yes, that's an amazing thing that you could do. There is, by the way, there's a wonderful webinar that's happening on Monday through the Nellie Mae Foundation, Democracy and Public Education in Peril. And that's a free event, and that's at 4 o'clock this coming Monday. But student scholarships and teacher scholarships to attend trainings and workshops, I think that that's an incredible thing that you can do.
This is Corey, by the way, and we deal with hundreds of school districts across the country and talking about how to provide resources for teachers and staff, right? And I think we've kind of come at this from two angles, right? We've kind of come at this from the top down angle, which is changing the administration, changing the people who are in positions of leadership. That type of top-down change obviously takes a lot of time and effort. It's not going to be something that happens overnight, but the efforts that come from the bottom up, right? What Donna is talking about, what some other folks are talking about, you can literally start to do those things today by finding resources for those individuals and bringing that support into the school system. Oftentimes individuals can choose to do those things outside of the purview of the school district if there is money available, or outside of whatever administrative sort of strategic policies are in place. So they don't necessarily need their approval all the time for things like that. So really important to know and to identify those places, because you really do need a top-down, bottom-up strategy, and you need to have patience, because that top-down thing is going to take you some time, but you can do it faster if you bring the two things together. So just keep that in mind, please.
Yeah, Corey, maybe it would be helpful if you were to talk about how a school district engages with your organization and what you provide. Like, how does it get started?
Yeah, sure. I'm not as a promotional thing here, but the way that we work at Rocket PD is we engage with individual thought leaders, people who we identify around the country who have a powerful message. Lavelle is in this room today, and Lavelle is someone who we work with, and then we try to work with those individuals to create programs that they can bring into the school system. And so we'll go out as an advocate to the school system and make sure that they know that these individuals are out there, that they have programs that can help them. We focus not only on sort of the keynote speech, but really helping these individuals develop programs that are very focused on outcomes and action oriented, so that when you sign up for a program, you're not just signing up to hear this person speak, you're signing up to learn a method and a strategic process that you can use and implement in your own work to start to make change. And so that's what we've done. We've found it to be very effective in dialogue and talking to school districts, because oftentimes with the districts, they say, oh gosh, we've heard this story 1,000 times, or I use this analogy. One of our thought leaders was speaking at an event and someone said, gosh, for years I heard this individual speak, and it seemed like he walked into a room and he pulled the pin on a grenade and he just left. Right. But he didn't give us any ideas for how we should go about doing these things, or what that would look like job embedded in our actual school system or in our community. Right. And so we try to kind of connect the dots on those things so that people aren't just walking into rooms and dropping grenades, which is easy. It's easy to talk about problems. It's very hard to create and actionize, if that's a word, solutions to those things. So that's what really needs to happen.
Corey, what's the name of your group again?
So my organization is called Rocket PD. You can find it at rocketpd.com. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn if you'd like to do that.
And Adaptive X offers a similar approach to things, right? How does that work for school districts when they want to engage with you?
So thank you. AdaptiveX works with schools, districts, and individuals. So we focus on 2 primary types of training. The first is our culturally responsive teaching academy. That can be modified for the school and the district based on what their needs are. Essentially, we take everyone through each of the brain-based, Zaretta Hammond-focused promising practices in education. We have modules aligned that go through those promising practices. We do the promising practices in practice analysis to see where schools, districts, or teams are struggling with specific competencies. Other way it came on, y'all, with the promising practices, to then build up their training and development in that targeted fashion. And then the racial equity leadership program focuses on leadership teams, schools and non-schools, but schools specifically, to help build that leadership structure, concept, mindsets, and work from that top-down approach to then have it trickle into the practices across the school. You could email me. I'll put my email in the chat to provide additional information, and see us on our website, which I will drop in the chat as well.